And let's finish the Mystery of Marie Rogêt. Pretty much, Dupin has boiled it all down to the idea that it is probably the sailor from the article he pulled who murdered Marie Rogêt. Let's see how this all wraps up. And what means allows of attaining the truth. We shall find these means multiplying and gathering distinctness as we proceed. Let us shift to the bottom of this affair of the first elopement. Let us know the full history of the officer with his present circumstances, and his whereabouts at the precise period of the murder. Let us carefully compare with each other the various communications sent to the evening paper, in which the object was inculpate a gang. This done, let us compare these communications both as regards style of MS with those sent to the morning paper at a previous period and insisting so vehemently upon the guilt of Menace. And all this done, let us again compare these various communications with the known MSS of the officer. Let us endeavour to ascertain by repeated questionings of Madame Duloc and her boys, as well as the omnibus driver, Valence, something more of the personal appearance and bearing of the man of the dark complexion. Queries skillfully directed will not fail to elicit from some of these parties information on this particular point, or upon others, information which the parties themselves may not be aware of possessing. And let us now trace the boat picked up by the bargeman on the morning of Monday, the 23rd of June, and which was removed from the barge office within the cognizance of the officer in attendance and without the rudder, at some period prior to the discovery of the corpse. With a proper caution and perseverance we shall infallibly trace this boat, for not only can the bargeman who picked it up identify it, but the rudder is at hand. The rudder of a sailboat would not have been abandoned without inquiry, but one altogether at ease in heart. And here let me pause to insinuate a question. There was no advertisement of the picking up of this boat. It was silently taken to the barge office and as silently removed. But its owner or employer, how happened he, at so easily a period as Tuesday morning, to be informed without the agency of advertisement of the locality of the boat taken up on Monday, unless we imagine some connection with the Navy? Some personal, permanent connection leading to cognizance of its minute interests, its pretty local news. In speaking of the lonely assassin dragging his burden to the shore, I have already suggested the probability of his availing himself of a boat. Now, we are to understand that Marie Rogêt was precipitated from a boat. This would have naturally have been the case. The corpse would not have been trusted to the shallow waters of the shore. The peculiar marks on the back and shoulders of the victim tell of the bottom ribs of a boat. That the body was found without weight is also corroborative of the idea. If thrown from the shore, a weight would have been attached. We can only account for this absence by supposing the murderer to have neglected the precaution of supplying himself with it before pushing off. In the act of consigning the corpse to the water, he would unquestionably have noticed his oversight, but then no remedy would have been at hand. Any risk would have been preferred to a return to that accursed shore. Having rid himself of his ghostly charge, the murderer would have hastened to the city, There, at some obscure wharf, he would have leaped on land. But the boat, would he have secured it? He would have been in too great haste for such things as securing a boat. Moreover, in fastening it to the wharf, he would have felt as if securing evidence against himself. His natural thought would have been to cast from him, as far as possible, all that had held connection with his crime. He would not have fled from the wharf, but he would not have permitted the boat to remain. Assuredly, he would have cast it adrift. Let us peruse our fancies. In the morning, the wretch is stricken with unutterable horror at finding that the boat has been picked up and detained at a locality which he is in the daily habit of frequenting, at a locality, perhaps, which his duty compels him to frequent.
The next night, without daring to ask for the rudder, he removes it. Now where is the rudderless boat? Let it be one of our first purposes to discover. With the first glimpse we obtain of it, the dawn of our success shall begin. The boat shall guide us with a rapidity which will surprise even ourselves. To him who employed it in the midnight of the fatal Sabbath, corroboration will rise from corroboration, and the murderer will be traced. For reasons we shall not specify, but which to many readers will appear obvious, we have taken the liberty of here omitting from the MMS placed in our hands such portions as detail the following up of the apparently slight crew obtained by Dupin. We feel it is advisable only to state in brief that the result desired was brought to pass, and that the prefect fulfilled punctually, although with reluctance, the terms of his compact with the Chevalier. Mr. Poe's article concludes with the following words. It will be understood that I speak of coincidences, and no more. What I have to say above upon this topic must suffice. It is in my own heart there dwells no faith in the praeternature. That nature and its God are two, no man who thinks will deny that the latter, creating the former, can at will control or modify it, is also unquestionable. I say at will, for the question is of will and not, as the insanity of logic has assured, of power. It is not that the deity cannot modify his laws, but that we insult him in imagining a possible necessity for modification in their origin. These laws were fashioned to embrace all contingencies which could lie in the future. With God, all is now. I repeat, then, that I speak of these things only as of coincidences, and farther, in what I relate, it will be seen that between the fate of the unhappy Marie Cecilia Rogers, as far as that fate is known, and the fate of Marie Rogêt, up to a certain epoch in her history, there has existed a parallel in the contemplation of whose wonderful exactitude the reason becomes embarrassed. I say all this will be seen, but let it not for a moment be supposed that, in proceeding with the sad narrative of Marie from the epoch just mentioned, and in tracing its denouement, the mystery which enshrouded her, is my covert design to hint at an extension of the parallel, or even suggest that the measures adopted in Paris for the discovery of the assassin of a grisette, or measures founded in any similar raticonation, would produce any similar result. For in respect to the latter branch of the supposition, it should be considered that the most trifling variation in the facts of the case might give rise to the most important miscalculations by diverging thoroughly the two courses of events, very much as, in arithmetic, an error which in its own individuality might be inappreciable produces at length, by dint of multiplication, at all points of the process, a result enormously at variance with truth. And in regard to the former branch, we must not fail to hold in view that the very calculus of probabilities to which I have referred forbids all idea of the extension of the parallel, forbids it with a positiveness strong, and decides just in proportion at this parallel has already been long drawn and exact. This is one of those anomalous preposterations which, seemingly appealing to thought, although apart from the mathematical, is yet one which only the mathematician can fully entertain. Nothing, for example, is more difficult than to convince the merely general reader that the fact of sixes having been thrown twice in succession by a player at dice is sufficient cause for betting the largest odds that sixes will not be thrown in the third attempt. A suggestion to this effect is usually rejected by the intelligent at once. It does not appear that the two throws which have been completed, and which lie now absolutely in the past, can have influence upon the throw which exists only in the future. The chance for throwing sixes seems to be precisely
as it was at any ordinary time, that is to say, subject only to the influences of the various other throws which may be made by the dice, and this is a reflection which appears so exceedingly obvious that attempts to controvert it are received more frequently with a derisive smile than with anything like respectful attention. The error here involved, a gross error, redolent of mischief, I cannot pretend to expose within the limits assigned me at present, and with the philosophy it needs no exposure. It may be sufficient here to say that it forms one of an infinite series of mistakes which arise in the path of reason through her propensity for seeking truth in detail. And detail there was. Not a lot of action, just a lot of exposition. Probably not the most fun thing I've ever read. I still liked reading it more than that Superman book. But for a more exciting story, Multiverse of Geekdom is reading The Sign of the Four by Arthur Conan Doyle, a Sherlock Holmes story. And if you want a better French accent than the one I was doing, or rather a Belgian accent, check out Mary Ellen Katz's walkthrough of the ABC Murders by Agatha Christie PC game, which is in 2 parts. That's Multiverse of Geekdom with Sign of the Four, and Mary Ellen Katz with the ABC Murders. Check those out at their respective YouTube channels. I will see you in the next video.